Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be looking back at two very iconic weapons within old school RuneScape, released on February 27th of 2002, the first two dragon items that were ever introduced to the game and all of its players. Now the Dragon Longsword and the Dragon Battleaxe were introduced into the game of RuneScape and changed how the game was played for a very long time. These two items were actually originally released as part of the first ever member content for RuneScape. It took many years later before other dragon items followed in 2005. For 3 years straight, the Dragon Longsword and the Dragon Battleaxe were the only dragon items within RuneScape and proved their worth by being the best of the best to use back in the day. Prior to 2005, these two staple items were the best weapon of choice for both killing as well as training. It wasn't until the introduction of the Abyssal Whip and the Dragon Scimitar that they lost their top tier status. Back in the RuneScape Classic days, there wasn't different stats, the melee styles were a lot simpler and all weapons had equal speed. There was just aim and power, that's it. This makes a big difference as there was less mechanics and stats back in the day compared to now, meaning something with higher aim and power were simply a lot stronger rather than having a special effect or niche. This meant that the sword and battle axe had simply higher numbers, meaning they were just better in every situation. The release was a huge move as it surpassed the best previous in-slot items which were Rune at the time, and notably only some Rune weapons were released as the Rune Battleaxe and two-handed sword released with the members update as well. Meaning at the time it was more so an upgrade from the Rune Scimitar. However, we can easily compare the stats of the original Rune Longsword and what the Dragon counterpart brought to the table. I mean, at the time the Rune Longsword stood at an aim stat of 49 and a power stat of 49 as well, while the Dragon Sword stood at 71 aim and 71 power, a whole 20% stronger than the weapon right behind it. However, it wasn't the raw stats that really made it a game changer, it was the fact that the system back then was just so simple. 2 stats, base numbers, that's it. Meaning unlike in today's RuneScape, in which a slash value could be higher than the relative stab one, making one weapon better than another for something specific, we instead had much more basic numerical and systematic values. This meant that the sword was 20% stronger, period. It was stronger to use for literally everything else, including fighting, training, whatever you wanted, etc, etc, etc. Similarly, the Dragon Battleaxe was more so a replacement to the Rune Scimitar like I mentioned. The Rune Scimitar had a power and aim of 44, while the Dragon Axe had a power of 75 and an aim of 69. This meant that the overall upgrade in using the Dragon Axe was 25 to 30% stronger. In turn, just like we mentioned for the Dragon Sword, it was under the same mechanic and also meant that essentially everything you used it against was 25 to 30% stronger. Now you may ask, how were these god tier items obtained all the way back in 2002? Well, you'd definitely be surprised. The biggest thing about these, despite their stronger stats and despite being so adaptive for everything you want to do with them, what truly made them so overpowered was actually how easy they were to obtain compared to their Rune counterpart. And yes, you heard me right, Dragon was easier to obtain than Rune despite it being better, which was really essentially why it was so overpowered. This is a big reason as to why they were really hyped and deemed so damn strong. Rune had to be crafted, and it wasn't an easy craft. We're talking about the absolutely insane smithing requirement of 99. Then came these dragon items and they changed the playing field completely. All you needed to do was complete a quest and buy them straight out of the shop. It wasn't very hard. They were way too accessible, and it meant that everyone would begin buying and owning them. Now, to be fair, the Dragon Battleaxe, which at the time was actually just named Dragon Axe, was a little bit harder. Not because of the difficulty, but more so its high 200,000 GP price. However, the original players were making pretty good amounts of money, so for anyone who could afford it, it wasn't really a huge deal. Regardless of what seems to be a steep price, it was the most popular weapon anyways. It was favored by players because of its high weapon power and its high weapon aim bonuses. It was super effective for training and questing and even PKing. It was simply put the best of the best in every way, shape and form, making it the king of all weapons back then. After the craze that were the Ruin weapons, it was a huge slap and super unexpected surprise when these were launched. I mean, we had a huge spike with the Ruin weapons that were worth millions upon millions, and they were being monopolized by early adopters and took hours upon hours of grind. They were really hard, and they laid down something that was of course frustrating but also super special. It honestly looked like with every new weapon upgrade, Jagex was going to make it harder and harder to obtain as well as use, but the dragon weapons that were released during this time proved us otherwise. Another big point as to why they were so strong and overpowered was how long their power spike actually lasted. They were top tier for much longer than most items are and remained the best of the best for 3 full years until 2005. The shortest update we can talk about was in the early 2004 with the release of the Dragon Dagger and the Dragon Mace, but they weren't seen as a major upgrade, meaning the next real upgrade came out only about a year after. This is an important point to talk about as in turn caused a little bit of an imbalance within RuneScape. To start us off, the release of the Dragon Longsword and Battleaxe meant an absolutely huge hit to the value of the current Rune weapons. Now, this is normally natural with anything new that's released with the intention of replacing the previous. However, this was much bigger than normal because of the major difference in accessibility like we talked about. The original players who monopolized Ruin were the richest of all players, and some say they still are till this day. It does leave the question and mystery of whether Jagex actually purposely made the Dragon Longsword and Battleaxe purchasable after a quest in order to refilter the influx of income that people made off of Ruin. The economy had some major shifts after Ruin, and it's actually possible these items and the entire concept of lowering the difficulty to obtain items, as well as future updates that lowered the grind times, all come from the same goal of placing the economy in a much more sustainable state. While that's just a theory, it does make sense if we do think about it. I could be overthinking myself personally or looking into it too much, but it's an interesting topic to think about regardless, and maybe a future conversation. Another big thing was how over the period of 3 years there was a little bit of a stalemate in terms of what was the best, because like we just mentioned, the Dragon Longsword and Battleaxe were very accessible and top tier, meaning everyone got to their upgrades super fast. This made everything kind of flat and did even the playing field for a long while. This left things very bland, and especially if we consider player versus player combat, everyone was just using the same tactic and doing the same thing. Everyone reached the goal of getting the best weapon pretty early, and it lasted for 3 years, so the game did kind of get a little bit boring. We did get some Ruin two-handed action, but for the most part we just saw a very high influx of tons of players simply using the new and powerful dragon items. Regardless of how crazy, overpowered, and accessible the Dragon Longsword and Dragon Battleaxe were at the time of their release, things did begin to balance themselves out later when Jagex made the Ruin items more accessible and followed up by adding more variants of weapons as well as a much more complex combat system. Everything just worked hand in hand with one another, and we eventually ended up with these tier of items that still stand as they originally were intended to until this day, but in a much more complex and intuitive way, and that's an impressive feat on its own. Anyways, with all that being said, that's about all we've got for today. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Let me know what else I can improve in the comments down below. I am always looking, and it's always super fun in my opinion to look at the very early days of RuneScape back when even combat was super simple. And if you do agree, then why not hit that like button? Remember to subscribe for some future content, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.